You don't pay rent. You don't live here. My son said it without raising his voice, as if he were explaining something obvious to a stranger. Not to his mother. Not to the woman who had carried him inside her body for 9 months, fed him when he could not hold a spoon, sat on the edge of his bed through childhood nights, when fever burned through his small body and fear made him cry for me. No. He spoke to me the way people speak when they have already decided, when they believe the matter is settled and the rest is just noise. He did not need to convince me. He only needed me to accept it. I remember standing there in the doorway of my own living room, my hand still resting on the wooden frame, as if the house itself might keep me from falling. The wood was familiar under my fingers, smooth from years of passing touches. I had painted that frame myself once, back when my hands were steadier, and my husband was still alive to tease me about choosing the wrong shade. The evening light stretched across the carpet I had chosen more than 20 years ago, a muted beige that had survived muddy shoes, spilled juice, and countless family gatherings. And yet, in that moment, I felt like I was trespassing in a place that no longer belonged to me. My chest tightened, not with fear. Fear is sharp and sudden. This was something slower, heavier, something old. Something that had been gathering quietly inside me for years, waiting for the right moment to wake up. Perhaps dignity does not die when it is ignored. Perhaps it sleeps. And perhaps, like tonight, it wakes up all at once. Matthew did not look at me when he spoke. His eyes stayed fixed on his phone, his thumbs scrolling and tapping in that impatient rhythm I recognized too well. He used to do the same thing as a teenager, pretending not to care when he was upset. I had learned long ago that when he avoided eye contact, it was because he did not want to feel what he was doing. His wife, Claire, sat at the kitchen counter, stirring her herbal tea. The spoon moved slowly, deliberately, clinking softly against the ceramic mug. She wore that faint smile she thinks I do not notice. The kind of smile that is polite enough to deny but sharp enough to wound. It was a smile that said, finally. Finally, the lines are clear. Finally, the balance has shifted. Finally, she knows her place. It was the kind of smile that makes a woman straighten her spine, even at 74. I don't pay rent, I repeated quietly. The words tasted strange in my mouth, like something sour that should not be there. Matthew, this is my home. For a moment, I hoped he would look up, that he would see my face and remember something. A scraped knee, a school lunch forgotten on the counter, a voice that once sang him to sleep. Instead, he sighed. It was not the sigh of someone who was conflicted. It was the sigh of someone tired of repeating himself, of someone who believes the conversation has gone on too long. Mom, please, he said. We've talked about this. Wait. The word hung between us, heavy with implication. You don't contribute, he continued. We cover groceries, bills, the kids, school, everything. And you just live here. Just live here. As if living were not already a full act. As if existing in the body of an old woman were not effort enough. As if breathing beneath my own roof required approval. I felt my fingers tremble. It was subtle, but I noticed. I always notice. So I folded my hands together, lacing my fingers tightly, hiding the shake the way I had hidden so many things over the years. Calm. That had always been my strength. 40 years of nursing had trained me well. I had held hands while doctors delivered bad news. I had cleaned wounds that made younger nurses turn away. I had learned how to keep my voice even while chaos unfolded around me. Tonight was no different. I see, I said. Only 2 words, simple, polite. They landed heavier than I expected. Claire glanced at Matthew, then back at me. Her eyes scanned my face, measuring, assessing, as though she were checking whether I truly understood what had changed. The guest. The burden. The old woman who should be grateful for whatever corner she was allowed to occupy. Something in her expression suggested relief, as if she had been waiting for this moment, for the final confirmation that she no longer had to pretend. I did not raise my voice. I did not argue. I did not remind them of anything. Not of the mortgage payments, not of the years, not of the sacrifices. I simply turned away. I walked down the hallway slowly, my steps measured, controlled. The walls were lined with photographs I had dusted that very morning. I had taken my time with them, polishing the glass, straightening the frames. There he was in kindergarten, smiling with missing teeth, holding a paper crown he had made in class. There he was at 8, gap-toothed and proud, clutching a soccer trophy. There he was as a teenager, awkward and tall, hugging me so hard after losing a match that I could barely breathe. I paused for a moment, my hand hovering near one of the frames. He had once needed me so desperately. I reached my bedroom door and closed it gently behind me. Not because I was defeated, but because something inside me had just begun to stand up. I sat on the edge of my bed long after the door closed, my hands still folded in my lap, as if I were waiting for instructions. The room smelled faintly of lavender from the sachet I kept in the drawer, a small habit I had picked up years ago when sleep first became difficult. The bedspread was neatly tucked, the way I liked it. Order had always calmed me. Tonight, it only reminded me how much of my life I had spent keeping things together for other people. Outside my door, the house went on without me. I heard Claire's voice drift from the kitchen, low and measured. Matthew answered her, equally controlled. They were careful with their volume now, careful not to sound unkind. That was how they preferred to do things. No shouting, no scenes, just decisions delivered quietly, leaving no space for disagreement. The television came on. Laughter followed. My grandchildren's laughter. It should have warmed me. Instead, it pressed against my chest like a weight. I lay back slowly, staring at the ceiling. I knew every faint crack, every uneven patch where the paint had aged. My husband and I had painted this room ourselves. He had teased me for insisting on a second coat. I had teased him for splashing paint on the floor. We had laughed that night, tired and happy, talking about what the room might look like when we were old. We never imagined old would feel like this. Sleep did not come. Hours passed, measured only by the quiet ticking of the clock on my bedside table. At some point, the television went off. The kitchen light dimmed. Footsteps moved down the hall. A door closed, then another. The house settled into the deep quiet of night. I remained awake. I thought about the word Matthew had used, contribute. It was a strange word to hear applied to a life, as if value could be calculated in grocery receipts and utility bills alone, as if years of labor, care, and presence dissolved once money changed hands. I had contributed plenty, just not in ways that left a paper trail. When Matthew was born, I worked double shifts and came home exhausted, my feet aching, my back stiff. I learned to sleep in short bursts. I learned to function on little rest. When he was sick, I held him through the night and still showed up for work the next morning. When his father and I argued, I made sure he never felt the tension. I believed that was what good mothers did. They absorbed the strain so their children would not have to. Later, when my husband fell ill, I became a caregiver again. I learned a new rhythm of patience and vigilance. I cooked soft foods. I counted pills. I sat beside hospital beds and spoke calmly while doctors explained what could not be fixed. I buried him quietly without complaint because grief felt like something private, something to be handled with dignity. After the funeral, Matthew had insisted I move in with him and Claire. He said it made sense. He said he wanted me close. He said family should take care of its own. I believed him. At first, everything was fine. I helped with the children. I cooked when Claire worked late. I folded laundry. I kept the house clean. Slowly, without anyone announcing it, my presence shifted. Help became expectation. Expectation became irritation. Irritation became silence. And now it had become this. Sometime after midnight, I sat up and swung my legs over the side of the bed. My joints protested quietly. I ignored them. I reached for my robe and moved toward the closet. At the back, beneath winter coats I no longer wore, was a small metal box. It was not locked. It never had been. I had never felt the need to hide it. I pulled it forward and placed it on the bed. Inside were documents that smelled faintly of old paper and time. Deeds, mortgage statements stamped paid in full, letters written in my husband's careful handwriting, insurance papers, A will that had been revised once, then left untouched. I did not open everything. I did not need to. I already knew what was there. The house had always been mine. When my husband and I bought it, we put both our names on the deed. When he died, his share passed to me. I never added Matthew's name, not out of mistrust, but out of habit. Things stayed the way they were unless there was a reason to change them. There had never been a reason. I closed the box and slid it back into place. For the first time that night, I felt something loosen inside my chest. Not anger, not satisfaction, something steadier. Resolve. Morning came quietly. I heard Claire moving around the kitchen, the familiar sounds of breakfast being prepared. Plates clinked. The kettle whistled. I waited until the house was fully awake before leaving my room. At the table, Matthew avoided my eyes. Claire smiled politely, her expression careful, as if nothing unusual had happened the night before. The children chatted about school. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat down. No one mentioned rent. No one mentioned contribution. The silence was thick but controlled. They assumed the conversation was over. They were wrong. After breakfast, when the children had left for school and Matthew had gone to work, I put on my coat and picked up my handbag. Claire looked up from the counter. "Are you going somewhere?" she asked. "Yes," I said simply. She nodded, already distracted. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. The walk to the lawyer's office took less than 10 minutes. I had passed it countless times over the years without ever needing to go in. Today, my steps felt surprisingly steady. Inside, the office smelled of paper and coffee. The lawyer listened without interruption as I explained. He reviewed the documents carefully. When he finished, he looked up and nodded. "You are the sole owner," he said. I thanked him and stood to leave. Outside, the air felt different, lighter. I did not feel triumphant. I felt prepared. That night, as I returned to my room, I realized something important. Silence is not the same as acceptance. And I was done being silent. The lawyer did not rush me. He sat back in his chair, folded his hands, and waited while I gathered myself. There was no pity in his eyes, no surprise, just professional calm. I appreciated that. I had spent a lifetime being the one who reassured others. It was oddly comforting to be treated as someone capable of handling her own affairs. "Do you want to proceed?" he asked. "Yes," I said without hesitation. He explained the process slowly, clearly. Ownership confirmation, formal notice, timelines, options. He spoke in measured tones, as if he understood that this was not simply a legal matter but a personal one. I listened carefully, asking questions when necessary, taking notes in the small notebook I carried everywhere. When I left his office, I did not feel victorious. I felt anchored. Back home, the house was quiet. Claire had taken the children out. I moved through the rooms deliberately, noticing details I had long stopped seeing. The faint scratch on the wall near the staircase from when Matthew dragged a chair too close. The loose hinge on the pantry door my husband always meant to fix. The window latch in the living room that stuck in winter. Every mark had a memory. I sat at the dining table and laid out the documents. I smoothed the pages carefully, aligning the corners. This table had hosted birthdays, homework sessions, and long conversations that stretched late into the night. Today, it became a place of reckoning. I read through the papers again, even though I already knew what they said. The language was plain, almost cold. Names, dates, signatures, no emotion, no history. And yet it was all there, quietly asserting the truth. Ownership. I remembered the day my husband and I signed the mortgage. We had been nervous, hopeful. The bank officer had smiled kindly, as if indulging our optimism. We left that office holding hands, laughing at nothing in particular, aware that we had taken on something enormous together. We paid it off early, not because we were wealthy, but because we were careful. We worked extra shifts. We said no when others said yes. We believed in building something solid. That belief had carried me through widowhood, through loneliness, through years of adjusting to a quieter life. And now it would carry me through this. I spent the afternoon preparing the notice. The lawyer had drafted it, but I read every line, making sure I understood its meaning. This was not an eviction. It was a declaration, a boundary set in clear language. I signed my name at the bottom, my handwriting steady. When Matthew came home that evening, I was in the kitchen making soup. The same recipe I had made for him countless times. He paused in the doorway, watching me. There was something uncertain in his expression, something almost childlike. "What's for dinner?" he asked. "Vegetable soup," I replied. He nodded and went upstairs to change. Claire arrived shortly after, carrying bags of groceries. She smiled at me briefly, then began unpacking, her movements efficient. No one mentioned the papers waiting in my handbag. After dinner, I retreated to my room. I placed the envelope on the desk and stared at it for a long time. It felt heavier than it should have, as if it carried not just paper, but years of unspoken resentment and expectation. I did not deliver it that night. Some things require timing. The next morning, I mailed the notice. The post office clerk stamped the envelope without looking at me. It slid into the outgoing bin with a soft thud. That was it. There was no ceremony, no turning back. When I returned home, the house felt unchanged. The same furniture, the same smells, the same routines, and yet something fundamental had shifted. 3 days later, Matthew found the envelope on the counter. "What's this?" he asked, holding it up. "It's for you," I said. He opened it quickly, his brow furrowing as he read. Claire stood beside him, her face tightening with each line. "What is this?" he repeated, louder this time. "Why would you send something like this?" "So we're clear," I said. "You told me I don't live here. This explains who does." His face flushed. "You went to a lawyer." "Yes." Claire crossed her arms. "This is extreme." "No," I replied calmly. "What's extreme is telling your mother she doesn't live in her own home." Matthew shook his head. "You didn't have to make it legal." "I didn't," I said. "You did." The room fell silent. The children watched from the doorway, confusion written across their faces. I did not want them involved. This was between adults. That night, Claire slept on the couch. I lay awake again, but this time my thoughts were steady. I knew what would come next. Anger, accusations, perhaps apologies. Paper remembers what people forget. And now, so did I. The house changed after the papers appeared. Not loudly, not all at once. It changed the way a body does after a fever breaks, quiet but undeniable. Doors closed more often. Conversations stopped when I entered a room. Claire moved around me with careful politeness, as though I were something fragile or dangerous. She had not yet decided which. Matthew barely spoke to me. When he did, his words were clipped, deliberate. He chose them the way people do when they want to sound reasonable but feel cornered. "This didn't have to go this far," he said one evening, standing in the kitchen with his arms crossed. "It already had," I replied. He exhaled sharply. "You embarrassed us." The word hung in the air. "I didn't embarrass you," I said. "I corrected you." Claire set a plate down harder than necessary. "We opened our home to you," she said, her voice tight. "We didn't have to." I turned slowly to face her. "You moved into my house," I said. "There's a difference." Her eyes widened just slightly. Matthew shot her a look, then back at me. "This is exactly what I mean," he said. "You're acting like we're the problem." "I'm acting like the owner," I replied. The children were sent upstairs that night earlier than usual. I heard their footsteps thudding on the stairs, their voices fatting. "Adults only," the silence said. Matthew paced the living room. Claire sat rigid on the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "You're really going to do this," Matthew said, "after everything." I watched him carefully. I had learned over the years that anger was often just fear wearing a louder face. "I already did," I said. He stopped packing. "And what exactly are you expecting? That we apologize and suddenly everything goes back to normal?" "No," I said. "Normal is over." Claire stood up. "We have children," she said sharply. You can't just threaten their stability. I'm not threatening anything, I replied. I'm establishing terms. 30 days, Matthew said bitterly. You gave us 30 days like we're tenants. That's what you are, I said. The words landed hard. Claire's face flushed. You're serious? Yes. Silence fell again, a heavy one. Later that night, I heard Claire crying behind their bedroom door. Not loud sobs, controlled ones. The kind meant to be hidden. I did not feel triumph. I felt resolve. The next morning, Claire packed a bag. She moved quickly, efficiently, avoiding eye contact. Matthew hovered near the doorway, uncertain, angry, helpless. I'm going to my sister, she said. I need space. Matthew looked at me, disbelief flickering across his face. You're tearing this family apart. I met his gaze. I didn't start this, I said. I finished it. The door closed behind her, with a final click that echoed through the house. The days that followed were tense. Matthew alternated between anger and silence. Sometimes he avoided me completely. Other times, he hovered, as if rehearsing words he could not bring himself to say. Then, one evening, he came into my room. He stood awkwardly near the door, hands in his pockets, eyes on the floor. I didn't mean it like that, he said finally. What I said. I waited. You know that, he added. Do I asked. He swallowed. I was stressed, bills, work, everything just came out wrong. I studied his face, the familiar features, the lines that came from years of worry, not unlike my own. And Claire, I asked. He hesitated, too long. She feels like you never accepted her, he said. I accepted her, I replied. I didn't surrender to her. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. So what now? I folded my hands in my lap. Now you decide whether you want to live here as my son or leave as a tenant. His head snapped up. That's not fair. Neither was what you said to me, I replied. He opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. Something shifted in his expression. I need time, he said. Time is what the notice gives you, I replied. He nodded slowly and left the room. That night, the house felt hollow. I walked the hallway alone, past the photographs, past the quiet rooms. I stopped in front of one picture I had not looked at in years. It showed my husband and me standing in front of the house on the day we paid it off, smiling, tired, proud. I reached up and touched the frame. I did the right thing, I whispered. The next morning, the phone rang. It was the lawyer. There's something you should know, he said. My grip tightened around the receiver. What? I asked. His pause was brief, but deliberate. Your son has contacted me too. The line went quiet, and I realized the next move was no longer mine alone. The lawyer's words stayed with me long after the call ended. Your son has contacted me too. I did not ask why. I did not ask how. I thanked him, hung up, and sat very still at the edge of my bed. For the first time since this began, I felt something close to uncertainty. Not fear, something sharper. The realization that Matthew was no longer reacting. He was acting. That night, he did not come home. The house was quiet in a way it had never been before. No packing, no slammed doors, no tension humming beneath the walls, just space. I moved through the rooms slowly, turning off lights, locking doors. When I reached the living room, I paused. This was where my husband used to sit every evening, glasses perched on his nose, newspaper folded just so. Where Matthew learned to walk, then to argue, then to believe the world owed him explanations. I sat down on the couch and waited. Morning came with a knock at the door. Matthew stood outside, pale, tired, holding a folder under his arm. His shoulders sagged in a way I had never seen before, not even after his father's funeral. Can I come in? He asked. I stepped aside. We sat at the dining table, the same one where I had laid out my documents days earlier. He placed the folder between us but did not open it right away. His hands trembled slightly. He noticed. He clasped them together, the same way I had. I talked to the lawyer, he said. I know. He nodded. I thought maybe there was something I didn't understand. Some arrangement Dad made, some agreement. And, I asked. There isn't, he said quietly. It's yours, it's always been yours. The words seemed to cost him something. I never planned to take it from you, he added quickly. I assumed, you never said otherwise. I never needed to, I replied. He looked up at me then, really looked. His eyes were tired, stripped of their certainty. Claire wants to sell the house, he said. I did not react. She thinks if we split the proceeds, we can start fresh somewhere else, he continued. She says this place holds too much resentment now. And what do you think? I asked. He hesitated, long enough to answer honestly. I think I made a mistake, he said. Not just with the house, with you. Silence stretched between us. I spoke to the kids last night, he went on. They asked why Mom isn't home, why everything feels different. And what did you tell them? I asked. That sometimes adults forget how to speak kindly, he said. And when they do, things break. I nodded once. I don't want you to leave, he said suddenly. I don't want this to end like this. I leaned back in my chair, studying him, the man he had become, the boy he used to be. Somewhere between those two versions stood the truth. I'm not leaving, I said. This is my home. I know, he said quickly. I mean, I don't want you pushed aside, treated like an obligation. You already did that, I replied. He flinched, deservedly. I know, he said again, softer, and I'm sorry. An apology finally, not loud, not defensive, just spoken. I let it sit. What happens now? He asked. That depends, I said, on whether you understand what this was really about. The house, he said. No, I corrected. Respect. He nodded slowly. Claire called that evening. I listened while she spoke, about stress, about feeling crowded, about believing I judged her, about wanting what was best for her children. I let her finish. Then I said, you moved into my home and decided I was a guest. That ends here. She was quiet. I will not sell this house, I continued. You may live here if you choose, but not as owners, not as rulers, and not without courtesy. She asked for time. I gave her the remainder of the notice period. 2 weeks later, Claire moved out permanently. Matthew stayed. Not because I demanded it, because he chose to. Things did not magically heal. We argued. We relearned each other. Boundaries were set, respected, tested, and reinforced. He began contributing again, not with money, but with presence, with listening, with humility. The children stopped asking when Grandma was leaving. They understood she was. Months later, I revised my will. Not out of spite, out of clarity. Matthew would inherit the house one day, not because he expected it, because he had finally earned the responsibility of understanding what it meant. Until then, it remained exactly where it had always been. Mine. Sometimes, late at night, I walk the hallway and look at the photographs. The same ones, the same faces, but now I see them differently. I see a woman who built a life brick by brick. I see a mother who gave freely, but learned, at last, to stand firm. I see a home that never changed hands, only truths. My son once told me I didn't live here. He was wrong. I always did.